The human supercarrier lurched and groaned, rumbling the entire derelict Nigean space station as its ancient fusion drives roared to life, and its human salvage crew realized this was no mere relic at all, but the key to their very survival. Captain Paul Bailey gripped a rusted safety rail as the cavernous hangar bay shook, his knuckles white. He barked orders at his small team to prep the carrier for launch. They needed to get this ship online and combat-ready, fast. The arrogant Nigerian military forces would storm the hangar any minute to seize it. This abandoned alien station orbited a dying red giant. But Paul had risked it all to salvage here, after a tip about a lost piece of human history. He just hadn't expected to find a fully intact pre-war human supercarrier, covered in strange alien glyphs. Now a tense standoff brewed between Paul's outgunned salvage crew and the heavily armed Nigerian troops right outside. Led by a vicious commander named Yaris, the Nigerians were hell-bent on capturing the Relic for themselves. But this was no mere relic, it was humanity's last shot. Paul's second-in-command, a grizzled veteran named Mikhail, had managed to decode some of the alien writing on the hull. The glyphs told an astounding story. This was the UES Titan, the most legendary warship in human history, thought destroyed in a brutal final battle centuries ago during the human-Nigerian War. The Nigerians had salvaged and cloaked it here, hidden from human eyes all this time. And if this supercarrier was still operational after all these years, with its advanced weaponry and shielding intact, then it could be the key to saving the embattled human race from its powerful alien foes once and for all. As the ship throbbed with power, Paul steeled himself for the fight of his life. The Nigerians would never let them launch. Humanity's survival hung in the balance. Paul stormed up to Yaris, fists clenched. "The Titan belongs to humanity. She's a piece of our history, our heritage. We have every right to reclaim her." Yaris sneered, his scaled features twisting. "Your right expired centuries ago. We found this derelict station, and by the laws of salvage, the Titan is now Nigerian property." "Bullshit," Paul spat. "You can't just erase our claim because you got here first. That ship contains lost human knowledge and technology. It's the key to our future." "Your future is not my concern," Yaris hissed, his clawed hand drifting to his sidearm. Paul's crew tensed, hands on their own weapons. The standoff was seconds from exploding into violence when a sudden boom shook the hangar. Dust and debris rained down, sending both sides scrambling for cover. Alarms blared. In the chaos, Paul locked eyes with Mikhail and jerked his head toward the Titan's open airlock. They bolted for it, dodging falling rubble. Yaris roared with rage as he realized what was happening, but it was too late. Paul and his team piled into the airlock, slamming the door controls. The heavy hatch sealed shut with a hiss, cutting off the sounds of Yaris's fury. Panting, Paul looked around at the Titan's interior, hardly able to process the advanced tech surrounding them. It was like nothing he'd ever seen, all sleek lines and glowing interfaces. As they ventured deeper into the ship, they found a large chamber filled with cryogenic pods. Frost obscured the glass, but the occupants were unmistakably human. Mikhail wiped condensation from one of the pods, squinting at the nameplate, his eyes widened. "Paul, this is Admiral Nathaniel Hawkins, the Nathaniel Hawkins, the greatest military mind of the Nigerian War." Paul stared at the pod, a plan forming. If they could revive Hawkins, his tactical brilliance could turn the tide against Yaris and his goons. He gave the order, and they began the thawing process. It was a long shot, but it was the only card they had left to play. Outside, Yaris seethed with rage. He barked commands at his troops, ordering them to cut through the Titan's hull. One way or another, that ship would be his. He would make the humans pay for their insolence. As the Titan's power surged back to life, the ship's advanced systems lit up. Paul stepped back, eyes wide as he took in the glowing interfaces and sleek tech that was centuries beyond anything he'd seen. It was almost too much to process, but there was no time to marvel. As a sudden clang reverberated through the hull, the Nigerians were trying to break in. Admiral Hawkins, now fully briefed on the dire situation, took charge. His tactical mind raced, assessing their options. "Let's see what this old girl can do," he muttered, his hands flying over the controls with a speed and precision that belied his centuries in cryo-sleep. Paul watched in awe as the Admiral brought the Titan's weapons online. The holo-displays showed an arsenal that was light years ahead of anything the Nigians had. Advanced plasma cannons, quantum torpedoes, graviton beams. It was a warship's wet dream. "God damn," Paul breathed. "With firepower like this, we might actually stand a chance." Hawkins nodded grimly. "That's not all. Look at this." He pulled up a schematic of the Titan, highlighting a strange, pulsing device at the ship's core. A jump drive. Experimental tech from the war. It can teleport this whole damn ship anywhere in the galaxy, instantly. Paul's jaw dropped. "That's impossible." "Not impossible. Just very, very classified." Hawkins met Paul's gaze, his expression grave. "If the Nigians get their claws on this—" He didn't need to finish the thought. The balance of power in the galaxy would be forever altered. The Nigians would be unstoppable. Another boom shook the ship. The Nigians were through the airlock. Yaris's voice crackled over the comms, dripping with menace. "Surrender now, humans, and your deaths will be quick." Hawkins' eyes narrowed. "Like hell we will." He turned to Paul. "Take a team to engineering. Secure that jump drive. I'll hold off the scalies." Paul nodded, heart pounding. He grabbed Mikhail and a few others, and they raced through the Titan's winding corridors as the sounds of battle erupted behind them. They didn't get far before running smack into a Nigian kill squad. Plasma bolts sizzled past their heads as they dove for cover. Paul blind-fired around a corner, buying time. They were outgunned and outnumbered. "Fall back!" he yelled, laying down covering fire as his team retreated deeper into the ship. The Nigians pressed forward, hissing with bloodlust. Paul's team fought for every inch, but the Nigians kept coming. They were being herded, cut off from the bridge, from Hawkins. Finally, they reached engineering. Paul sealed the blast doors, buying them a few precious minutes. "Find that jump drive," he ordered, praying that Hawkins was still alive. Mikhail ran his hands over the consoles, trying to make sense of the ancient tech. Then he froze, eyes widening. "Paul, the drive is linked to a network of hidden human bases scattered across the stars, remnants of the war." Paul's heart leapt, a surge of hope, fierce and desperate. Maybe, just maybe, they had a shot after all. The blast doors shuddered as the Nigians began to cut through, the screech of metal on metal filling the air. Paul and his team raised their weapons, ready to make their stand. Paul's heart raced as he took in the gravity of their discovery, a network of hidden human outposts, scattered like lifelines across the stars. It was a game-changer. He turned to Mikhail, his voice low and urgent. "We need to get to those bases. Rally what's left of humanity, regroup, and take the fight to the Nigians." Mikhail nodded, his fingers flying over the console. "I can program the jump drive, but we'll need time to calibrate it. And we'll have to choose our destination carefully. Who knows what state these bases are in after all this time." Here, sudden explosion rocked the engineering deck, cutting him off. The Nigians had breached the blast doors. Yaris strode through the smoke, his elite guard fanning out behind him. His eyes locked onto Paul's, burning with a cold, predatory hunger. "End of the line, human." Paul and his team moved to block the Nigians' path to the jump drive, weapons raised. "Not yet, you scaly bastard." The two sides clashed in a whirlwind of violence, plasma bolts and shrapnel flying. Paul ducked and weaved, his rifle bucking in his hands as he put down one Nigian after another. But Yaris's guard were the best of the best, and they gave as good as they got. Mikhail cried out as a plasma bolt seared his shoulder, but he gritted his teeth and kept working on the jump drive. They just needed a little more time. Yaris lunged at Paul, his claws raking across Paul's armor. Paul staggered back, then surged forward, slamming his rifle butt into Yaris's jaw. The Nigian commander hissed in pain and rage, his tail lashing. They traded blows in a brutal dance, their personal rivalry fueling every punch and kick. Around them the battle raged on, the fate of the Supercarrier hanging in the balance. Paul saw an opening and took it, driving his knee into Yaris's gut. As the Nigel doubled over, Paul dove for the jump drive console. His fingers brushed the activation key. But Yaris was on him in an instant, slamming Paul away from the controls. The Nigerian's claws tore into the console, ripping out wires and components in a shower of sparks. "No!" Paul shouted, but it was too late. The jump drive hummed to life, the damaged control panel flickering erratically. The ship shuddered as a swirling vortex of energy engulfed it, ripping it out of reality and hurling it into the unknown. When the chaos subsided, an eerie calm settled over the engineering deck. The Titan drifted in an unfamiliar starscape, its jump drive spent and smoking. Paul hauled himself to his feet, his head spinning. He took in the stunned faces of his crew and the equally disoriented Nigans. They were lost, stranded in some far-flung corner of the universe. And then the proximity alarms began to wail. "Incoming contacts," Mikhail yelled from his console, his voice tight with dread. "Multiple capital ships, unknown configuration. They're on an intercept course." Paul and Yaris locked eyes, a moment of understanding passing between them. Whatever their differences, they were all in the same cosmic lifeboat now, and if they didn't work together, none of them would survive. Paul lowered his weapon slowly, his jaw tight. "Truce!" he ground out, the word bitter on his tongue. Yaris bared his fangs but nodded. "Truce for now." As the mysterious alien fleet closed in on the crippled supercarrier, the humans and Nigans scrambled to put aside their enmity and prepare for a fight unlike any they had faced before. The battle for the Titan was over. The battle for their very survival had just begun. As the sleek alien warships drew ever closer on the view screen, panic and desperation gripped the Titan's battered crew. Paul and Yaris barked orders to their respective teams, putting aside their rivalry to focus on the monumental task at hand. Engineers swarmed over the damaged jump drive, frantically splicing wires and rerouting power in a race against time. Sparks rained down on Mikhail as he struggled to replace a burnt-out capacitor. His hands shook, slick with sweat and blood. They were so close, just a few more repairs, and the Titan could jump to safety. But the aliens were closer. "Incoming fire," a sensor operator yelled. The deck shuddered as the first salvo slammed into the Titan's weakened shields. Consoles exploded, showering the bridge in shards of glass and twisted metal. Admiral Hawkins gripped the tactical display, his face grim. He knew what had to be done. "Yaris, Paul, I'm taking a strike team to the hangar deck. We'll launch in fighters, try to draw their fire." Paul whirled to face him. "Admiral, no, it's suicide." Hawkins met his gaze, his eyes haunted but resolute. "We're out of options. You need more time." He clasped Paul's shoulder. "Get our people home, Captain. That's an order." With that, he strode off the bridge, a handful of grim-faced volunteers falling in behind him. Paul watched them go, his chest tight. Then another blast rocked the ship, and he forced his attention back to the task at hand. Failure was not an option. In the hangar, Hawkins and his team scrambled into fighters. The deck was already a chaos of fire and debris, the force fields flickering as the aliens hammered at the Titan's defenses. Hawkins powered up his engines, his jaw set. "On me, people. Let's buy them some time." The fighters rocketed out of the hangar, angling straight for the alien fleet. Plasma beams lanced out to meet them, filling space with deadly light. Hawkins jinked and wove, his hands flying over the controls. He lined up a shot on the lead warship and squeezed the trigger, sending a quantum torpedo streaking towards its hull. The torpedo detonated in a blinding flash, the shockwave rippling across the alien shields. Hawkins bared his teeth in a feral grin. "Come on, you bastards, let's dance." And then the aliens were upon them, and the void erupted in a maelstrom of fire and shrapnel. Hawkins and his pilots fought like demons, weaving desperate paths through the storm of destruction. One by one, their fighters winked out, consumed by the onslaught. But they bought the time they needed. On the Titan's bridge, a cheer went up as the jump drive hummed back to life. "All systems green," Mikhail called out, his voice hoarse with exhaustion and relief. Paul felt a surge of elation. They'd done it. Against all odds, they'd brought the old warship back from the brink. He opened a ship-wide channel. "All hands, prepare for emergency jump." But even as he spoke, a searing lance of energy sliced through the void, spearing the Titan amidships. The supercarrier lurched, alarms screaming as the beam carved through decks and bulkheads like a scalpel. In engineering, consoles exploded in showers of sparks. Crewmen screamed as shrapnel tore through flesh and bone. Yaris roared in pain as a support beam crashed down on him, crushing his legs. He struggled weakly, green blood pooling beneath his broken body. Paul staggered to his feet, his head ringing. Emergency lights painted the bridge in hellish red hues. He looked to the view screen and his blood ran cold. The jump drive was a ruin of twisted molten metal, irreparable. And the aliens were closing in for the kill. Paul clenched his fists, his mind racing. There was only one option left, one last desperate gambit. He opened a channel to the remaining crew. "All hands abandon ship. Get to the escape pods now." Confusion and fear rippled through the survivors, but they obeyed. They knew the look in their captain's eyes. Paul turned to Mikhail, his expression grim. "Rig the jump drive to overload. Set the reactor to go critical. We're going to blow this ship and take those alien bastards with us." Mikhail swallowed hard but nodded. His fingers danced across the controls, initiating the self-destruct sequence. As the countdown began, Paul made his way down to engineering. He had to see this through, had to make sure. He found Yaris pinned beneath the wreckage, the life fading from the Nigian's eyes. For a moment their gazes locked. A lifetime of hatred and rivalry hung between them. And in that moment, understanding passed between them, a silent acknowledgement of the sacrifices they had both made, the sacrifices still to come. Paul knelt beside his bitter enemy and grasped his hand, an act of solidarity in the face of annihilation. Yaris squeezed back weakly, a final gesture of respect. And then Paul was moving again, racing against the countdown. He sealed the blast doors, ensuring the drive's detonation would consume the ship. As the timer ticked down to 0, Paul's thoughts turned to Admiral Hawkins and the brave souls who had given their lives to buy them this chance. To Yaris, his unlikeliest of allies in the end. To all the lives lost in this bitter war between their peoples and the uncertain future that awaited the survivors. He closed his eyes as the jump drive reached critical mass, a blinding light consuming his vision. He felt a searing heat, a rush of unbearable pressure. And then oblivion. In the void, the Titan erupted in a cataclysmic blast, a miniature supernova that engulfed the alien fleet in an inferno of plasma and radiation. Ships crumbled like tinfoil, their hulls shattering under the onslaught. The shockwave rippled outward, the very fabric of space-time buckling under the strain. For a brief searing instant, a second sun blazed in the darkness. And then it was gone, leaving only drifting wreckage and the fading afterglow of quantum fires. In the silence that followed, the escape pods drifted like motes of dust against the infinite backdrop of stars. The survivors huddled within, numb with shock and grief. They had escaped the battle, but the war was far from over. And the price of their survival had been higher than any of them could have imagined. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.